start, I'm trying to see if there are any faces that I haven't introduced before. And I'm wondering, Reza Sharif, Reza, I just do not know you, but you may be, have come on before. Please introduce yourself.
Yes, I am Reza Sharif and I am with MTO Shah Masudi, Islamic Sufism.
Ah, yes. With Nigar.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Wonderful.
Welcome.
Welcome. So glad you're
Thank you.
Reza's a regular on our Meaningful Monday calls too.
It's nice to see you, Reza.
Thank you. Thank you, Margaret. Appreciate it.
Great. Well, with that, I'd like to start with our covenant. So I'm going to turn it over to Channing because she knows who she's asked to do our covenant today. Thank you.
Do you all have your notes as to which part you're reading? Good, so Margaret's going to start out.
Thank you, Channing. Thank you, Carolyn. The governing board and the elected council build and provide a sacred environment that will nurture the growth towards a world of interfaith peace. In solidarity with one another and with each affirm.
Felicity's next.
Brandy?
Felicity's next.
Our dialogue is an interfaith dialogue. We all have different communication styles and varying views. We commit to be in dialogue with respect for all, expanding, listening to hear multiple points of view.
We realize that we are responsible for the growth of I4C, and each of us shares a duty to interfaith growth. The governing board provides leadership, and the elected council works toward progress and the fulfillment of I4C goals as we grow.
One more.
I don't see Rebecca. She was the third reader.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm just going to read. We recognize that we are imbued with interfaith responsibility. As such, we commit to hold ourselves and each other accountable to merit that trust, respect for the diverse traditions, beliefs, and spiritual paths of all those we encounter, hold ourselves to the highest ethical standards, and accountable to our communities and to I4C.
Our shared time is interfaith time. We commit to honoring the start and the end times each time we meet.
Thank you so much. Let's see, Channing was also going to share a poem, Let Peace Flow, with us all.
Yes, the poem that I've selected today is in honor of the International Day of Peace, which is coming up on the 21st of September. And the title of the poem is Let Peace Flow. Let us join in a spirit of quiet meditation. Let peace flow into you. Let it calm your troubled self. Heal your needy self. Help your angry self to remember to listen fully and compassionately to the other. Let peace flow around you until you walk with peace and speak words of peace and reflect all the radiance of this beautiful world. Let peace flow through you and beyond you. Let peace guide you and fill you with wisdom. Let it be the bridge that connects you, not just with people of goodwill, but also with people whose hearts are centered in their own needs and desires, who are not yet free to bring peace into their hearts. Let peace fill the world. Let it begin now, here, today. We ask this in the name of that power that dwells within us and beyond us, a power called by many names, in many times and places, but whose universal name is love.
Thank you, Channing. And today we have the good fortune to have Mohamed Chaudhry offering us a faith reflection. Mohamed, can you turn on your video so we can see your face?
Okay.
As we get to hear from you, please.
Oh.
Thank you.
Should I start? أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Brothers and sisters and people in the faith, it's my honor and pleasure to say a few words. And I'm going to talk about our Islamic tradition and about only 3 articles of Islam which directly focus and tackle the current issue number 1, which is racism and discrimination, and the bitterness and the deprivations that come when people get distinguished on the basis of the color of their skin. We as Muslims believe, and you all know that, we believe in 5 pillars. And those 5 pillars, one is of course the belief, that is the gateway, which we call Shahada. But I'm going to talk about the second one, which is prayer, 5-time prayers. You often hear that we go to the mosque or to an Islamic center and we pray. And we are ordained to pray 5 times together. The whole philosophy behind staying together and praying together is that as we cross the threshold, and threshold used to be a very sacred barrier some time back when it used to exist and visibly exist. So once you cross that threshold, you enter into a different world and you leave behind all your discriminations. So in the house of God, that's what we call an Islamic center or a mosque. Over there, everyone is equal. So the whole philosophy behind praying together is to not only know each other, but to melt into each other, but to forget all the differences and establish the spirit of equality, total equality. There is no distinction in the mosque between people of different colors, of people coming from different status of life, wealthy or poor, whatever they may be. So those distinctions are just left outside. I'm not saying that Muslims are free from discrimination. Unfortunately, they are equally victims of those, but that's what I'm talking about, the religion. That's what the religion stands for. So praying together is to establish the concept of total equality and love and of knowing each other. Now, the second pillar that I'm going to talk about is zakat. Zakat is charity. Now, we all know, and in Christianity and in Judaism, in every religion, this is the way suggested to help those who are deprived, who are poor, who somehow are left behind in life, and so to help them. But in Islam, a very practical suggestion has come up in the form of an order, because zakat is applicable only on those who are blessed by God and who have means. Now here it is mandated. The beauty here is that it is not the poor man that he should be looking at those who are blessed for some help. No, the whole honest burden is on the rich person. He has to look for the poor and get rid of the money that has never belonged to him, it had been the poor man's share growing in his income. Now, that was the most practical form of helping the poor, maintaining their dignity. So zakat is that 2.5% that we pay. It's the poor man's share growing in our income. And it's not the poor man that he should be knocking at the door for help. No, it's the rich man who has to look for the poor. That was the most practical thing. And it still is. But I will focus mostly on the last pillar, which is Hajj. 2.5 million people on earth gathering together at one place, attired in the simplest form of dress, 2 pieces of unsewn cloth, just in the form of a shroud, bereft of all their distinctions, their status, rich and poor, white or black or brown. They come from all over the world. So Hajj every year is the manifestation that human beings are capable of rising above all their differences and be together, be together. So this gathering is in fact a kind of abandonment that people are able to pull themselves out of the material world in which we get lost, as is the way of the world. That they undertake the biggest journey of their life for no other purpose but to be there, but to be together. Labbaik Allahumma labbaik. They keep on chanting this song of the soul just to register their presence. So what is there for in it that eliminates racism? Yes, this is possible in the modern times, that so many people can leave away the worldly distinctions and can present themselves together in love, in peace, and making and renewing the pledge that basically they are human beings. So that is the biggest show of humanity, and that is the biggest show of unity in which people leave behind all their racial distinctions. And I draw your attention to many, many verses in the Quran where this modern cry which came up from the deep throat of George Floyd, let me breathe, let me breathe. This was not new in Islam. Islam, basically, when the message was given, it had a lot of appeal only for the destitutes, for the poor, for the orphans, for the left-outs. Because Islam based itself not on nasab, not on kinship, not on ancestral pride, not on tribalism. It based itself on min nafsin wahida. That is, all of us are one single humanity. One single humanity. So that is how it was born, and its appeal initially came and became very attractive to the poor, to the destitutes. And I give you the example of 3 people only. Bilal, now he was a Ethiopian colored person, you can say black person, and he was a slave. And in that tribal culture, you can understand what, how it is to be a slave. So he was punished just because secretly he embraced himself Islam. So he was tortured, but anyway, he was bought and he was freed. And this black person, whose choked voice finally went and became the voice of Islam. He rose to great heights to such an extent that his choked voice became the most melodious voice of the azan, which the call for prayers. It is said that nobody could be more melodious and more appealing when he made the call. And he became the finance minister of Prophet. So that was his status. And there was another guy, Suhaib, and he was a Greek. He also rose to great heights. Salman Farsi, he came from Persia. But what I'm trying to say is that these people, they were nothing. And Islam's basic target has been to remove the distinctions and establish equality. And the Prophet, all his life, because he himself had been a triple orphan. His father had died before when he was born, and his mother died when he was 6, and his grandfather died when he was about 9. So he was triple orphan, and in a tribal culture, you can well understand how it is to be an orphan. An orphan means that you have no nasab, that you have no ancestry, that you are nothing, less than nothing. So that was his state, and then he rose from that. So his appeal was, and practically he understood the pang and the pain which the poor people, the discriminated people suffer. So Islam gave the beautiful message of equality, and we display it through our rituals and through the articles of faith. And I gave you the best example of every year takes place during the times of Hajj, when so many people with so many varieties of languages and colors and shades and other differences, they melt into one single body, giving the message that this is what human beings are meant to be. And Islam very beautifully traces its the origin of people, lifting it from nasab and taking it back to our first parents, that are Adam and Eve. That is, we come from there, and they were created by God. So in that sense, color is not of any importance. What is importance is that Islam shifted the emphasis from nasab and this racial distinction, shifted it from there to personal piety, personal righteousness. That is, anybody in Islam is better by virtue of his or her good deeds, of his personal piety. That is what distinguishes, otherwise there is no distinction. This distinction is only and only not of ancestry, not of wealth, not of color, or not of pelf, but only and only of personal piety. That became the distinguishing mark and a defining sign of a Muslim's piety. So if currently we are facing this problem in the Muslim world too, and especially these days, there's a lot of bitterness going on, and which is a very disturbing feature, that in this beautiful country, the most advanced country, and it has already gone through a lot of such discriminations, and the scars had hardly been in a healing posture that again those scars of discrimination and deprivations, are coming up again, and because that should not have been happening. So I just wanted to share the Islamic tradition and how and what solution Islam offers to this curse, because discrimination in any form is something that holds people back. They does not let them to flourish. It does not let them to bring the best of themselves out, and their talent remains rusty, and they're never able to fully exploit. And that's one reason that it's like a form of cancer, and we have to promote love and peace in this beautiful country, and wherever we see that a good segment of the society is suffering only because of their color or caste, or by virtue of their religion even. And so we have to raise our voice strongly and stand with them, because this curse, this evil has to be cured and got rid of. So that's what I wanted to share with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohamed. It was very nice hearing from you and
Thank
hearing
you.
how Islam addresses racism.
Yeah, that's how I just briefly I try to share with you that how we look at it. I can give you many, many examples. Once the Prophet told a newly appointed government official, and he gave him this piece of advice, and he told him, fear the cry of the oppressed. Fear the cry of the oppressed, what we call orphan. For there is no barrier between it and God. That is, we are warned, because the sigh that comes from the heart of a destitute, of a poor, of an orphan, God accepts that immediately. God listens to that immediately. So what is the solution? I would say that the solution is there, that the shared values should be applied equally with equal opportunity for all, and the values should be applied as a bridge, not as a bypass selectively, and people should be given full opportunity. They have every right as human beings. It's how unfortunate that people should be discredited only because they are born with something like maybe the color of their skin or something like that. That's not their fault.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm going to move on to the business part of our meeting, and it's hard to transition gracefully from that, but I will try. Thank you.
Thank
you. The minutes were sent to you all, and I hope you got them. And did anybody have any revisions?
I just wanted to apologize to my group. I had been the scribe, and had to leave to go to work and had every intention to follow up with what our points were, and I neglected to do that. I flaked on it, so I'm sorry. Our points were covered by other comments that were there, though, so we really didn't have anything too different to pass on.
Thank you, Sharon. I understand it's a juggling act, right? Let's see. So I will accept the minutes as read. The next items on the agenda are the reports, and I think maybe we'll start with Ken. Ken's our financial person, and Ken, can you tell us how we're doing on the fall appeals are just in the mail to you all, and can you give us that report? Thank you. Unmute yourself, Ken. Hopefully he's going to unmute himself here.
Okay, I think I got myself unmuted here. Financially, this was a kind of a steady state month, which is to say that we took in just about enough funds, a little bit short, to cover all of our expenses, and wound up with basically almost a break-even month, down by a couple $100. I would like to call the attention of the group, though, to the fact that our individual contributions really were in shortfall this month. We did not see much at all in the way of individual contributions, and that is a significant part of why our overall revenues were down for the month. But we have started our fall appeal that has just gone out, and hopefully will be productive. And I would urge each of you to look for that message in your mailbox and respond to it once you receive it. We had $23,385 in our bank balance, and that's just about almost exactly what we had last month.
I have to admit, we're skating not low and not in my comfort zone at all, but we're all going to have faith that we're going to find a way through this, and we're actively looking for grants. And so if you're aware of funding sources that might be appropriate for our programs and what we do, please alert Will or I, and we're actively seeking that. Thank you, Ken. Let's see, Terry Moss, would you like to give us an ICARE update?
I'd love to. First, I wanted to thank Mohamed for his talk. Not only was it informative, reinforcing what I've learned from my Muslim sisters in my Interfaith Women's Circle, who've become good friends of mine, but it also ties right into ICARE and one of the shared values that we have among all of our faith traditions, which is caring for those or supporting those who are in need of support in a way that provides them with in a way that provides them with dignity in taking care of themselves with the support of the community. And that's what ICARE is all about. A number of you on this call I can see have participated already, and thank you so much to help us get launched and lost. Oops. And that would be Kate and Terry Clark and Susie Cole, just on my first screen, the people that I'm seeing who've supported us in our first pilot project, which we did where the Sufism Reoriented partnered with LOPC, Lafayette Orinda Presbyterian Church, to create 550 hygiene kits that went to the county, who distributed them to people who don't have shelter. So we are now populating our Sign Up Genius website, and I can put the link in the chat with projects that we have for this month, September, into October, and I'm about to add November and December. And the projects that we're focusing on right now are called Breakfast Bags for Trinity Center, which supports low-income people and people who don't have shelter. And these are very simple, non-perishable items that go into a breakfast bag along with notes of support and compassion. And thank you, Will. And there's a specific Sign Up Genius link also that I'll send you to. But so these breakfast bags, they need 30 a day for 5 days a week, but they will take whatever they can get. And we already have a sponsor. Each project requires co-sponsors, a congregation who's willing to take on coordinating the event. And once they sign up, you sign up as a co-sponsor, then the whole project opens up to, thank you, opens up to individuals who want to sign up and participate, and the co-sponsoring congregations coordinate the project. So we have we have a Trinity Center with these breakfast bags that will be going through October, November, maybe into December. We have Monument Crisis Center is putting together, we don't have the details yet, but the Thanksgiving fixins, they call it. So it's like a food drive. And then we're also looking at Opportunity Junction and adding them in November, December. And the volunteer opportunity includes interviewing skills and things like that. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of need out there. And the people who are participating, my Interfaith Women's Circle has signed up for a week to do breakfast bags, and other women's circles are signing up. And it's a great opportunity to engage your congregation, to co-sponsor, and to get your members of your congregation or faith tradition to support that. There's an Islamic Center in Bay Point that is taking a week at the end of September for the breakfast bags. So it's a great opportunity to get to know another faith tradition and partner with them, and to do something very tangible to help the people in our community. So I encourage you to look at the Sign Up Genius, look at our website for descriptions of ICARE, and then please bring the message back to your congregation and invite them to sign up as a co-sponsor. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. It's a really exciting program for a lot of different reasons, and I'm really hopeful that more and more people will get involved. Oh, one other thing I saw, sorry, Rebecca, we are her faith community, the Church of Latter-day Saints, is going to be one of the co-sponsors of another hygiene kit project. And I'm looking at another congregation that will be partnering with them. I should have information on that in the next day or two. So we've got a lot going on.
Terry, should we also mention that Sharon Campton was heavily involved in our pilot project for the hygiene?
Of course, I'm so sorry. I get into trouble if I start naming people, and I'm just, you know, I'm so sorry. Yes, Sharon was our coordinator, regional coordinator, and took a lot of the heat of making sure that everything was coordinated between the two congregations and the county health department. So yes, thank you, Sharon, and thank you, Terry, for reminding me of that.
Yeah.
I also wanted to mention that Terry Moss is our vice president of the Interfaith Council, and she will be transitioning to president next year, and so she can't keep doing all this work on ICARE, and it does take some coordinating. And so if we have anybody out there that is interested in volunteering to help coordinate these projects, meaning helping line up faith communities to serve in this capacity, and use Sign Up Genius to take on a project, boy, Terry's going to need help, because she can't keep doing it as much as she's able to do right now. So it's a great job, and if anybody's up for it, please speak to Terry or myself or Will, and we would just dearly love the help.
And we would love to have regional coordinators that can be kind of the point people for congregations in different parts of the county, so it doesn't fall too much on just one person, and maybe creating a team for it. So if you're willing to be a part of that team, even, that's what we're hoping to find members to help work on that.
This is a great tangible opportunity to learn about another faith tradition, to be able to specifically and tangibly help improve the lives of others. And while I've got the stage, here's my political statement.
Voting is our superpower. Yes, good. Like the T-shirt. Hey, thank you, thank you.
I think, wait, Kate Boisware had a comment. Kate, you need to unmute yourself. Kate?
You're muted, Kate.
I just wanted to put in a word for this wonderful project. I was really surprised, I don't know why, by the amount of joy that emerged from doing this project. You know, we talk a lot together, we hear each other speak, there's words, we read, we sing together in concerts, but there's something about rolling up your sleeves together and doing a tangible project that's very different. And when you have a challenge together, this was a challenge, let me tell you, you know, having done it the first time, but getting to know Sharon and Terry and working with them was just a real joy. And I still get warm feelings thinking about it. So I got more out of it than I gave, I think. So I just want to say that about this work.
Oh, that's nice.
PSA, thank you.
Terry, I had a question for you, and I was wondering if there's a possibility or potential for developing something along the lines of mental health care networking in our community, from either offered through different faith traditions or through the existing community resources like NEMA and others.
I don't know, Randy, if you want to research it. It's not something that I'm aware of, and it's not something that I mean, if you have an organization, and you know, ICARE is set up to have nonprofit partners, and so if there's a nonprofit partner that deals with mental health in our community,
like NAMBY,
then, you know, yeah, and if you know somebody that I could contact, then I can do that. I don't have the time or ability to research it, but if somebody wants to do the research,
I would be willing to partner with you with that, because I think in service to our community, we serve the whole people holistically, the physical, material needs, the psychological needs, particularly during the pandemic and the crises that we're going through. And also,
and maybe we can partner with NAMI on that, since they already have a faith extension for the National Alliance of Mental Illness.
Yeah, and they're located in Salvia Street in Concord, near where I live, and I will check into that. I'll do the research
Thank
there.
you. This needs to be a team effort here. And the more we see who can be involved, the better. More than just coming to this meeting. That's great. I would love that.
And the needs are multiple.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Thank you. Let's see, I want to move on to Julius Van Hook. Reverend Julius Van Hook, I know you're on here somewhere.
Yes, good morning, everyone.
Thank you. Give us your juvenile chaplaincy report.
Yes, so we've had quite a bit going on. Things have been busy. We're still working to get services up and going at the juvenile hall. We have I've completed the schedule. It's just a matter of once we got clearance, and things were kind of set back once again. So it's kind of a waiting game, but at least we have the schedule in place for all of the Sunday services. I've been continuing to provide pastoral care and spiritual care and support via phone and Zoom and all of those things, and doing what we can to continue to do that, which has been as successful as possible. I also joined the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, which is a committee there at the Juvenile Hall, and they're also including the ranch at this time, and that's really good. I was recommended by the probation manager to join that team to help address a lot of the issues that have been going on, and so I'm working with them. We're doing events and days of care to help support the staff and their needs, and to make sure that diversity, it's actually DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, to make sure that things are equitable and that people feel supported. So I'm glad that I was recommended to be a part of that committee, and I'm going to do my part to make a difference in that. We're still waiting to hear some of the verdicts regarding the ranch. There's still so much going on with that as well. So I will keep you posted on that. We're not exactly sure. I did get some feedback and some great notes from the meeting that the task force meeting that the district attorney Becton had. And I want to thank Meg for sending me some highlights. I really appreciate that because we had our ICHANGE meeting going on at the same time. And so there's a lot going on with that. I won't go into all of that at this point in time, but just know that the DA does not have plans to close it, but rather to move towards working her restorative justice program and keeping our kids in non-punitive detention settings. So that's her vision and where she's headed to. Last month, I was a speaker for the Rossmore Interfaith Council. And they're very big supporters of the ranch program, the senior tutor program, and that entire community. And we had an amazing time at their Big Questions forum. And I would really enjoyed myself there. We're still working to continue to connect with new communities, new faith communities during this time. We have been getting letters, we have been getting cards, and I'm excited about that. I'm glad that those things, we're still continuing to get those. Once again, a lot of these kids have never received mail of their own. So, you know, I give them sometimes daily, sometimes weekly delivery of their own encouraging word from you all and our other partners who have been a part of that.
Well, thank you so much, Julius.
I think that's pretty much it. Yes, and then and Carolyn will get together on that also. I've been looking for grants and we've been finding some things. So just continue to send positive vibes and prayers and well wishes that we would get selected for those in which we've applied for. Thank you.
Yeah, the ICHANGE committee has formed and we are pursuing all kinds of ideas of how best to support Julius in his chaplaincy and we've got lots of ideas and we'll report more when they pan out or when they come to fruition, but they're exciting. Let's see, I want to report out that Robert, where Collins are you on? This is what's hard when you have multiple pages. He was on.
I am here.
Oh, good. Why don't you tell us, Reverend Collins, about your new position in Monterey? It's so exciting.
I am excited to share with you that I've been selected as the senior minister of the Monterey Center for Spiritual Living. It's a beautiful community, gorgeous physical facility, which we can't have access to right now, but I know it's on its way. I've been connected with this community through our parent organization, Centers for Spiritual Living, for several years now. And the pulpit became open last year in August. And I was really interested in pursuing it. And then in January of this year, I just got this download from Spirit that said, go for it. And so I hesitated and I argued with Spirit and it kept saying, go for it, go for it. So my official start date was last Saturday. We negotiated our contracts and I will be relocating probably around mid-November and looking in the Monterey Pacific Grove area for housing. So I'm very excited about it. It is with the degree of sadness that I leave this group because it's been such a rich treasure for me in my life. I do plan to maintain my membership so that I can continue to receive the communication and just give you great blessings on your journey as the work continues. And perhaps at some point, I plan to join the not at some point. I do plan to connect with the local Interfaith Council, which the center is a member of. And, you know, maybe somewhere along the journey, we can do some collaborative work together. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Robert. We really want to congratulate you. That's wonderful news. I'm very happy for you. And oh, what a nice place you're moving to, huh?
Yes.
Oh my. Let's see, I wanted to briefly give a report that, you know, we got feedback from some of our new elected council members this year that they needed more background on I4C and what was their role as being a part of the elected council. So we've been working on that, and hopefully by next month we will have a document to share with you. So thanks to Terry Moss and Terry Clark and Will, we have drafted some ideas about describing more of a one-page, this is the role and the expectations. So we're working on getting our act together on that one to get out to you. We also, Ken is here, and I think Ken is willing to share that he will be stepping off the board after many years as our treasurer, at least 6 that I know of. And boy, we will really miss him. And he brought such a strength and talents to all this. So we're looking for a new treasurer. And as Terry Moss said, we can't replace Ken, but we need, you know, not everybody has the financial gene, right? And so it takes a unique talent. So we don't have anybody particularly in mind. So we'd like feedback from you all. If you know of a person in your faith communities that is particularly good on being a treasurer and might be willing to help us, boy, we would really appreciate telling Will or myself, and let's see if we can find that. Celia, you have your hand raised, but you're on mute.
Sorry. Is there a job description for this?
For the treasurer? Ken, is there a job description? You know, that's a good question. We can write one. We do have a good bookkeeper, and so it's not the bookkeeping part of this. So we have a paid bookkeeper position, but it is the financial and secretary part of our job. So we can work on that.
Okay.
Yeah, the answer to the specific question is we have about halfway done on a job description for the treasurer. So hopefully it's going to be completed in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Well, I will make sure and send it out to you all as I solicit for help, right? And last but not least, we are looking for a note taker as well for the elected council, someone who's willing to help jot notes. In just a rough form is fine. So if any of you are willing to play that role, I really appreciate that help, because I try and share this and do that at the same time, and that's really hard. Yes, Terry, you have a question, Moss.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that part of what we hope from the elected council is that you are representing your congregations and all your friends who are interfaith supporters. And so when we have a call for, say, someone to replace Ken as a treasurer, that you kind of go through your, I'm gonna use an old term, Rolodex, your mental Rolodex, a file of names, and think of people who might be able to serve in this capacity. Or whenever we ask for, you know, we have a need that needs to be filled, if you think about your congregation or the people that you know and see if anybody comes to mind.
Yeah, we're all volunteers here, so I really appreciate the help. So note taker and treasurer are top on our list this month. Without any further ado, I want to move on to our important presentation today and discussion. So Will, please introduce.
Sure. We have Rahimeh, Remezany, and Ishaq Pathan from the Islamic Network Group. We're so grateful that they're with us. And some of our own members, especially Zula Reeves, Channing Miller, and Jessica Sterling, who have gone through the ING training, are going to do part 2 of the Creating Inclusive and Equitable Communities, especially looking at the history of xenophobia and discrimination in our own context. And so we did do part one of this presentation in February when we were still meeting together in person. So this is part two. We don't have a recording of that first portion, but there is information on the website of ing.org about how you might even be able to invite them to bring a panel like this to your own congregation. And I'm going to turn over to Rahimeh.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having us here this morning with you all. I hope everyone is doing as best they can, given the state of things right now, especially here in the Bay Area. As Reverend will kindly introduce me, my name is Rahimeh Remezany, and I'm a program manager with Islamic Network Group, the organization putting on today's event, and I have the honor of being your facilitator this morning. We were with you all, as Reverend Will said, right before the pandemic took off in the United States in February. So for some of you, this will be a good second look at the presentation, and for others, this will be your first time. To quickly introduce ING, ING stands for Islamic Networks Group, which is a peace-building organization that provides education and engagement opportunities that foster understanding of Muslims and other misunderstood groups to promote harmony among all people. The program we have brought to you all today is the Intercultural Speakers Bureau, the link to which Ishaq mentioned is in the chat if you want more information. The Intercultural Speakers Bureau is ING's latest program that aims to address the history of the formation of narratives about colonialized peoples, which has led to what we call today implicit bias, and how these narratives became embedded in American society, which then led to institutional racism that functions differently for each non-white group. Today we have a panel of esteemed speakers who, as Reverend Will mentioned, are all very familiar to you, who will each discuss a different angle of the topic, and towards the end we will transition to a short discussion and Q&A with you all. I encourage you to write down your reflections and questions as they come up. Reverend Will, just to clarify, we're starting a little bit late. Do I have to stop at 10 on the dot?
If possible, but let's see. And if folks are able to stay a little bit after 10, let's just text me if you're not able to. Okay. And if we'll continue as we can, and we do have a benediction from Erica Baines before our official meeting ends.
Okay. Okay. Great. Awesome. So, given that, we'll play with the timings and see as much as we can get out of it. So before we dive into our speakers, let's set some context for us this morning. Can everyone see my screen? Can I get some thumbs up if you can see the screen? Okay, sweet, awesome, great. So yes, today we are here to examine the genealogies, impact, and interconnectedness of bigotry against Indigenous, African American, Latinx, Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, and Asian American communities, and to inspire our audience, God willing, to counter bigotry with call to action. So the context of today's panel, as some of you, especially with the protests going on widely since June, there's continued racism against Black, Native American, Latinx, and many other groups. There have been, in recent years, a spike in hate crimes, and of course, like keeping in mind that a rise in hate crimes means that it wasn't at zero and it goes from zero to, you know, oh, now they're happening. They were already happening and now they're even more so than usual, which is even more concerning. So hate crimes against Muslims rose 84% over 2 years. Anti-Semitic attacks, incidents rose 80% in 2017. And in California specifically, hate crimes rose 17%, 51% against Latinx, 27% against Muslims, and 20% against African Americans. Aside from statistics, sometimes numbers are a little bit hard to wrap our brains around. What does this mean? Despite civil rights gains, education gains, professional advances, racism continues and is very prevalent. Police bias towards Blacks and Hispanics. For instance, Black drivers are twice as likely to be arrested during traffic stops than whites. Black drivers are 3 times and Latinx 2.5 times more likely to be searched during police stops. And as just 2 examples, the Obamas, whatever you may feel about them politically, it is clear that their family experienced racism that is not experienced by other presidential families. And there was a Muslim mayor in New Jersey who was racially profiled, detained at the airport when he was going on vacation to Turkey with his family. They held him for so many hours that he missed his flight, had to come back the next day, and still was held and barely made it on the plane the second day. And he is a mayor of a U.S. town, and even then he was still not exempt from this treatment. So how did we get here? The genealogies that we are going to cover today are colonialism, racialization, xenophobia, internalization, and systemic racism. So I am going to turn it over to our first speaker who will be discussing colonialism. Let me get Channing, I believe this is you. So let me spotlight your video. There we go. Go ahead, Channing.
Great. Hello, everyone. I'm going to address the topic of colonialism today. So the term colonialism refers to the policy of acquiring full or partial control of another country, occupying it with settlers and exploiting it economically. European colonialism refers to the period when it began in the 15th century, continuing until the mid-20th century when most colonized nations gained their independence. Although Europe was only 8% of the world's landmass, during this time they colonized over 80% of the landmass. Europeans were seeking landmass and resources in areas already inhabited by indigenous people. Gold, God, and glory were the motives behind European explorations, expansion, and colonization of Americas, Africa, and Asia. Next slide. The Doctrine of Discovery. One of the motives in the United States was summed up in the term manifest destiny, the 19th century belief that American settlers were divinely destined to expand across the continent and beyond. There was religious, political, and legal justification for colonization of land inhabited by non-Christians. Christian denomination and superiority were promoted, and there was inspiration for manifest destiny in the United States. Well, how was colonialism justified? By the 20th century, most of the non-European world had been colonized by European powers. In order to justify colonialism and exert power and control over indigenous peoples, they had to be cast as lesser beings. This led to a creation of knowledge or narratives that privileged Western culture, people, norms, and ideals. These were primary to native cultures and non-Christian religions. This narrative plays out in history, leading to the foundation for the dehumanization and the demonization of those groups. Well, how were non-white men depicted? In the Americas, native peoples, especially on the East Coast, were in need of being forcibly relocated or even exterminated to make room for European colonists. White superiority prevailed, seeing Native Americans as savages to be civilized, converted, fought, or killed. In the Declaration of Independence in 1776, they were speaking of Native Americans when they said, "They have excited domestic insurrections amongst us, and they have endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions." Robert E. Lee in 1856, reflecting his views of Africans in his justification of slavery, Lee said, "The blacks are immeasurably better off here in America, morally, physically, and socially. The painful discipline they are undergoing is necessary for their further instruction as a race. And it will prepare them, I hope, for better things." How long their servitude may be necessary is known and ordered by merciful providence. And President Grover Cleveland in 1888 said, with the rise of immigration from China, President Cleveland said, an element ignorant of our Constitution and laws, impossible of assimilation with our people and dangerous to our place, or to our peace and welfare. Well, how were non-white women depicted? Non-white women were often depicted as backwards and oppressed, or as exotic sex objects, or both. European travelers to the east of Africa imagined or visited these places with such imagery in mind. These images became ingrained in readers' minds through popular novels such as Heart of Darkness in 1899 by British author Joseph Conrad, which became a standard assignment in any college or high school English course, as well as adapted for radio, theater, television, and even video games. It has been criticized for the otherization of Africans. How were religions depicted? Non-Christian religions and their adherents were often negatively depicted as backwards, violent, and a threat. Jews were viewed as greedy Christ killers, Muslims as infidels who threatened Christendom, and Buddhists and Hindus as backwards. The attitudes underpinned colonialism as reflected, these attitudes underpinned colonialism as reflected by the chairman of the British East India Company, who described Hindus as a people exceedingly depraved. Justifying and reinforcing repressive policies of colonialism was the process of racialization of people, which we will be talking about next.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Reverend Channing. Next, we will move to Zula. Let me find your camera. Oh, I can only see 6 people at a time. Here, I'm going to stop share for a second so I can look at you guys. Zula, help me find you. Where is she? Zula, can you wave? Then I can see you more easily. I saw her earlier. Is she not here?
I'm here.
Where?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hello?
It usually, I'm sorry.
We can hear you,
There's
Zula.
something wrong. Okay. There's something wrong with the signal where I
there
am.
There we go. Thank you so much. Okay, great. Here you go.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry.
All right. I can hear you when I go away.
Okay.
So if I'll just keep talking.
Yeah, no, you're all good.
Okay. Yeah, because it's going in and out. Okay. Hi, I'm Zula. We will now look at a second factor leading to bigotry, which is racialization. Process of racialization. Racialization refers to the process by which people with certain physical or ancestral similarities are assigned to racial categories. Certain attributes are then assigned to that racial group, and racialization is then used to create and justify a hierarchy that privileges whiteness in certain Protestant religions and the oppression of a group by representing it as less human. For example, racialization was used to justify colonialism in the Americas, Asia, Africa, based on a view of non-white people as inferior to Europeans and whites. Some groups are fluid within the hierarchy. For example, Irish Catholics were once disdained as others, but are today viewed as white. Jews today are viewed as white, but still discriminated against for their non-Christian faith. Examples of assigning diverse groups into a racial category. Racialization assigns diverse groups of people into racial categories in which the groups didn't previously view or identify themselves. For example, various distinct African tribes with diverse languages and customs were lumped together by Europeans as part of the same group because they looked similar as Black or Africans. Native Americans, who are very diverse in cultures and languages and belong to many different tribes, were all grouped together as one category, American Indian. The British lumped together a rich diversity of religious and cultural traditions, which prior to colonialization had disparate beliefs into a category called Hinduism and its followers, Hindus. Muslims today, despite their origins in over 50 majority Muslim countries with diverse cultures, languages, ethnicities, and race, have recently come to be seen as making up one monolithic group. This same process applied to Europeans who, as late as the two world wars, were on opposing sides of conflict, but were united in the colonialism project. Today, they are all classified as one group called Europeans or Westerners. However, the dominant group is generally afforded more nuance. So, for instance, European history or civilization is given far more detail than the history of Native Americans, despite the latter's diversity of tribes and cultures. Additionally, there is a general divide that predates but was crystallized by colonialism of the West versus the East. Europeans and the West are viewed as the norm, while the East, which is viewed in comparison, is inferior and in need of emulating the West. This geographical and cultural divide is summarized in the first lines of the Ballad of East and West, famous English writer and poet Rudyard Kipling. Oh, East is East, and West is West, and never the twain shall meet. Racial categories assigned attributes. Once these racial categories are determined, the groups and their members are assigned attributes, which are then used to generalize about the entire group. Africans were viewed as inferior, barbaric, living in backwards conditions. The transatlantic slave trade, which transported 10 to 12 million enslaved Africans to the Americas from the 16th to the 19th century, was based on a view of Africans as subhuman. Native Americans were characterized by Europeans as backward savages in need of civilizing and being saved through conversion to Christianity. This view was used to justify abuses of Native Americans and the confiscation of their land. Similarly, Hindus were seen as backwards and immoral, and their religion regularly criticized by Europeans. Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of England from 1940 to 1945, said, "I hate Indians. They are a beastly people with a beastly religion." Muslims, who for centuries were seen as the enemy to Europe and Christendom, were similarly characterized as following a false religion, backwards, childlike, and irrational. There was some recognition of their past accomplishments in contrast to their state by the time they were colonialized by Europeans. 18th century French writer François Auguste Remezany compared Muslims to American Indians acknowledging their once civilized state. With the American Indian, everything declares that the savage has never reached the state of civilization, while with the Arab, everything indicates that the civilized man has fallen back to the state of savagery. Easterners were collectively characterized as primitive, exotic, and irrational, wanting in logic, reason, and accuracy. As Lord Cromer, England's viceroy in Egypt in the 18th century, wrote, "Want of accuracy, which easily degenerates into untruthfulness, is in fact the main characteristic of the Oriental mind." He also said, "The Oriental generally acts, speaks, and thinks in a manner exactly opposite to the European. Easterners were therefore viewed inferior to Europeans or Westerners, viewed themselves in contrast as rational, civilized, virtuous, and representing a superior civilization which others need to emulate in order to advance and modernize." Despite the fact that most European colonies have today gained their independence and major advances following the civil rights movement, the belief in European superiority to non-European people is deep-rooted in the globalized world, and many of these stereotypes are still with us today. It has only in the last few decades that such representations have been challenged, largely because of activism and writings by Native people demanding respect for their histories and cultures. The result of racialization is racism. Racism has been and continues to be enforced by various sectors of society. They include scientific theories. In the 19th and early 20th century, a number of leading scientists, including Charles Darwin, maintained that there were inherent differences, including differences in mental capacity between people of different races, proponents of racial ideologies, including proponents of slavery in the United States and anti-Semites, and ultimately the Nazis in Europe, cited these ideas in support of their policies. These theories have been generally dismissed in recent years. The education system. History is often taught from the perspective of the supposed majority, i.e., the white male. This has led to the erasure of Native American or Black history, or to the misrepresentation of their history, contributions, strengths, and culture. With history taught from the perspective of Europeans as the norm, it often diminishes the contributions of non-Western peoples, such as scientific and technological contributions of Chinese and Indians, and the fact that during the golden age of Islam Muslim lands were the center of advancement and learning, while Europe stayed static for centuries until the Renaissance. Everyday terms such as algebra, chemistry, and coffee testify to the contributions of the Arabs and Muslims that are often overlooked in our history and dominant culture. Racism is reinforced by various institutions and continues to be disseminated by popular culture, including the media, literature, Hollywood, and the internet. The media generally casts Blacks, Latinx, Muslims, and others in a negative light, over-reporting on bad news and under-reporting on positive stories featuring these groups. Popular culture continues to disseminate racism through such venues as literature, written from the standpoint of white or with white protagonists. Hollywood, which generally casts whites as the protagonists or heroes, and non-whites in stereotypical roles as servants or villains, or video games which cast Muslims and others as the enemy. While since the late 20th century, the notion of biological race has been generally rejected as a cultural invention without scientific basis, racism continues to be used by those in power to reinforce existing racial hierarchies through government policies which target people of color, such as racial profiling, the war on drugs that focuses enforcement on blacks, ICE raids that focus enforcement on Latinos, and a travel ban directed mainly against Muslim-majority countries.
Awesome, thank you, Zula, so much. Next, we will go on to Jessica. Yes, there you are, awesome. Spotlight your video, go on ahead, Jessica.
Hi. So I'm going to be talking about xenophobia. One of the outcomes of racialization is governmental policy that reflects the othering of certain groups of people and the fear of immigrants, as we see in the history of xenophobia, which we'll discuss next. Xenophobia is defined as the fear of foreigners or others, and new immigrants often face xenophobia, which is based on or justified by racist attitudes. Xenophobia is a manifestation of racialization in that it views new immigrants as part of a racial group that is distinct from the majority and not worthy of belonging to mainstream society or deserving of equal rights. Xenophobia operates within the concept of a so-called dominant culture, which is defined as a set of norms and practices that are dominant within a particular political, social, or economic entity in which multiple cultures are present. The dominant culture becomes the standard against which people and groups are judged. This contributes to xenophobic attitudes such as fearing or censoring those who speak a different language, follow religious practices, or wear clothing that is outside the dominant culture. Next slide. Xenophobia in America. From the start of the country, settlers in the United States viewed and treated Native Americans and Africans as subhuman others in order to seize the land of the former and enslave the latter. While the US is, except for Native Americans and African Americans, a nation of immigrants, it has a long history of successive waves of xenophobia targeting various groups. The Irish were one of the earliest groups to meet with anti-immigrant sentiment in the 1840s due to both their origin and their Catholic faith. Anti-Chinese hostility on the West Coast, based on racism and economic competition for jobs that led to the passing of the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act. From the late 19th to early 20th centuries, bigotry and fear of rising immigration from Southern and Eastern Europe, especially of Italians and Jews, led to quotas, which greatly reduced immigration. Anti-Mexican hostility has a long history in the US, including lynchings and other vigilante actions. At the turn of the 20th century, American employers recruited labor from Mexico for jobs in various industries, but following the Great Depression, these same workers were blamed for the economic downturn and subjected to the Mexican repatriation, a mass deportation between 400,000 and 2 million Mexicans and Mexican Americans from the US between 1929 and 1936. An estimated 60% of those deported were birthright citizens of the US. Between the two world wars, there was rising anti-Semitism, and during World War II, there was increased hostility toward Germans and Italians. But the greatest wartime bigotry targeted Japanese Americans, who were incarcerated in concentration camps on the West Coast as a security precaution. Today, Latinx groups are once again facing bigotry and discriminatory policies, as are Muslims, South Asians, and Arabs. Xenophobia in America today. Anti-Latinx sentiment has spiked in the last few years, resulting in such policies as ICE raids and deportations, detentions, separation of families at the border, and rhetoric and policy supporting a border wall with Mexico. While Muslims were previously subjected to stereotypes, 9/11 was used as a pretext for Islamophobes to demonize all Muslims, and by extension, Sikhs, South Asians, and Arabs. Muslims have been stereotyped as a security threat, and the recent travel ban banned entry of people to the US from mostly Muslim-majority countries, purportedly to keep out alleged terrorists. There's also been a spike in anti-Semitism in recent years that is often linked to anti-immigrant sentiment. Next slide. Excuses for xenophobia. Common excuses for xenophobia or xenophobic episodes have included increased migration, especially of groups from a different religion, economic competition and downturn, as in the case of the 19th century Chinese immigrants, who, like most immigrants, would take jobs at any wages available. Questions of loyalty to the US due to conflict with the immigrant's mother country, as in the case of Japanese Americans who became suspect for treason. This 1942 cartoon by children's author Dr. Seuss, just days before the incarceration orders, portrays them, the Japanese Americans, as a fifth column. Since 9/11 and the subsequent war on terror, many politicians and others have voiced similar sentiments toward Muslims. Next slide. So let's look at the facts versus myths on this topic. While the percentage of the US population that is foreign-born has been rising since 1970, with immigrants comprising 13.6% of the US population, it still hasn't reached the record high of 14.8% in 1890. Additionally, studies show that immigrants actually help improve the economy. While immigrants have generally had the same percentage of college degrees as American-born adults, recent immigrants are more likely to have college degrees. In fact, a 2017 study found that 28% of all physicians and surgeons were immigrants. 40% of Fortune 500 companies were created by immigrants. Immigrants often do jobs that Americans will not do, such as backbreaking labor, picking produce. Additionally, immigration is tied to economic growth in declining cities where American-born families no longer want to live. Immigrants create new jobs by forming new businesses, accounting for around a quarter of entrepreneurs and a quarter of investors in the US. They also contribute to the economy by purchasing homes, spending their income, and paying taxes. Moreover, immigrants are in fact loyal to the US. For example, a Pew study of Muslim Americans found that 92% were proud to be American, a figure similar to that of all Americans, according to a Gallup poll. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jessica. Now we're going to turn off to our last panelist, Ishaq Pathan of ING. Here you go, Ishaq. Your video is recorded. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much to Rahimeh for setting the scene, and thank you to my fellow panelists for really laying out some of the framework which brings us up to the present. So Reverend Channing spoke a little bit about colonialism and the ways in which Europeans crafted narratives about non-Europeans peoples that still live with us today. Zula spoke a little bit about racialization and the ways in which in the process of creating narratives, Europeans defined other groups of people and assigned certain categories that are associated with them, you know, Black being bad, and then a hierarchy in relation to white, which is usually good. And then Jessica kind of touched a little bit more on the policies that the United States has employed throughout history that have historically and at present kind of brought out some of those xenophobic fears that the United States was based on. And so I'll talk a little bit more about how does this affect us today. And so the first thing is internalization. And internalization is really what we call the adoption of stereotypes about an entire group of people. And these things come from all the ways in which racialization, xenophobia, and colonization are reinforced, primarily through the education system, through popular culture, through policy, and so on. Next slide. And then what we see with internalization is an understanding of how that leads to implicit biases and unconscious attitudes. Now, you may have had an implicit bias training here. If you haven't, I recommend having one of those trainings as well, because it'll get to be a little bit more at the meat of the ideas of these initial thoughts that we have about other groups that are more instinctive based on our socialization. So naturally viewing Muslim, not naturally, but instinctively viewing Muslims as terrorists or viewing African Americans as dangerous as examples. Unfortunately, implicit biases have strong links between the biases and people's behavior. In terms of studies, there's studies that are done that show that doctors are less likely to prescribe pain medicine for African American patients because they don't believe them when they're expressing their pain. Thank you. Next slide. It then takes the role in a systemic level when thinking about the ways in which we're going from an individual perspective in terms of implicit biases to a large grain level of which this is embedded throughout the society, in which the dominant group, stemming from kind of the historical European white, but now taking a new form, is able to impose conditions on the rest of the society to maintain the status quo and the ways and the power structure that we see. Next slide, please. Institutional racism involves many different factors, all of which contribute to a disadvantaged, lower quality of life. And so those could include low-cost housing, poor schools, low jobs, which leads to low income and wealth, combined with oppressive domestic and foreign policies, some of which Jessica mentioned, racial profiling, a biased criminal justice system, low-quality healthcare, and so on. So they really impact the day-to-day lives of many of these communities. I'm now going to spend very brief amount of time on the ways in which systemic racism affects unique different communities. So in relation, next slide please. In relation to indigenous peoples, we see tons of challenges in relation to reservations today, in relation to poverty, malnutrition, incarceration, lack of water and good soil. These indigenous peoples are most likely the first to face the impact of climate change. Next slide, please. As well as kind of other ways in which they're disadvantaged in terms of college education, food and health disparities, as well as misrepresentation in popular culture, where the history focuses more on wars than on like the richness of the indigenous culture. Next slide. For African Americans, it's also, it's somewhat similar in terms of seeing a level of housing discrimination and health inequalities. Next slide. We saw a lot of that in relation to African Americans, indigenous peoples being some of the most disproportionately disadvantaged during COVID-19 and the healthcare offerings to those communities. Next slide. Next slide. It also affects Latinx Americans. Next slide. Primarily in relation to echoing the Hispanic invasion with certain laws, as well as ICE raids that really instill fear in the community, especially the undocumented element of the community. We also see the ways in which law enforcement and the criminal justice system affects that community. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. And then with Asian Americans, the model minority myth kind of was upheld to view certain Asian Americans in a particular light, but has been kind of debunked in a lot of ways, recognizing the diversity of Asian American communities. And the most important being today, where because COVID originated in Wuhan, China, many Chinese have been blamed for this and have been subject to tons of attacks and a surge of attacks in the process. Next slide. For Jewish Americans, next slide. We see increasing hate crimes and violence in that way, particularly which are kind of at the root of white supremacist, white nationalist movements. I think of Charlottesville, where they would chant, Jews will not replace us, as an example, often believing that Jews are behind a lot of the movements of other people. And then finally, with Muslim Americans, next slide. We see Muslims being viewed as the enemy and that being reinforced through popular culture. And then next slide. and then through government policy throughout history, the most recent being the Muslim ban. And so I'll end there. I'll post a link in the video because we didn't have much time today because of the nature of our session. I'll post a link in the chat, which has a webinar that you can watch, which has more of the section that I spoke about from the perspective of those communities. So it has an Indigenous person speaking about the Indigenous systemic racism and so on. So I'll put that in the chat.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Ishaq, so much. Carolyn, do you mind if I just wrap up really quickly?
No, please do.
Okay. No. I want to respect everyone's time here this morning. Yeah, I apologize, guys, for the sake of time. I'm going to have to just nip us in the bud. We had wanted to do Q&A, breakout session, and so on, but unfortunately we'll have to just conclude. So I do want to just spend a very, very quick moment on calls to action. I'm not even going to share the slide. I'm just going to go over it. As Ishaq mentioned, he's going to share the link to the handouts where you can look at things in full. So the calls to action that we want you guys.
Rahimeh, can you spotlight yourself so we can see you?
Oh,
Some
sure.
of us are hard of hearing.
Oh, sure. No, thank you very much. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, I'm going to assume yes. Great. So again, I'm just speeding through these things. So the top calls to action that we want you guys to take this information that we learned today, a lot of it is about history and then how things are playing out today. What is it that we as individuals can do? So the first one is that we first have to undo our own biases, our own implicit bias, through training such as this. Ishaq mentioned having a specifically implicit bias, just on training just on implicit bias. There are so many books, there are so many guides, there's so many articles, especially going on right now, that you can continue your learning, and reflecting is absolutely a huge part of that. Being an upstander in the sense of stepping in when you hear racism, when you hear xenophobia, when you hear someone voicing their biases or assumptions about another group of people, just checking in like, hey, that's not okay, hey, why? A lot of times when you ask people, why is it that you say that, like they get caught up because they just assume everyone agrees with them. And that can be an easy way to kind of interrupt some problematic comments that people make. Engaging with those who are different from you. Of course, the Interfaith Council of Contra County is amazing for that, because by its definition is an interfaith, interacting with people of different faiths. But we also very much encourage you to interact with and engage with people online, in person, as is safe. So unfortunately not right now, but when we are safely able to engage with people in person, to participate in different groups where people who are from different backgrounds are there and you can talk to them and learn about them, continue these conversations, and then stay informed on laws and policies that are being put into place that continue and perpetuate systemic racism. And then as you are able, if you are a U.S. citizen and you're able to vote, we highly encourage you to participate in that part of being an American citizen, that you can vote, get the word out about the ramifications of certain policies to your friends and the people in your circle of influence. I see that Reverend Will said yes, that we will be putting this on YouTube. I do apologize again for having to make this very short and cut off, but thank you also so much for your attention this morning. I wish you all peace and safety in this time of COVID-19, and especially right now with the air being like orange in the Bay Area. I wish you all well. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahimeh, and all of our other panelists today. Thank you so much.
Thank
This
you.
is sign language for clapping.
Yes.
Good job.
Be well.
Thank you so much. Great job. And can you share your slides with me, and in particular your action items that you've just listed, so I can distribute them to our audience?
I included a call to action resource in the chat, and we can also email it directly to you.
Great,
and
thank
that
you.
will be a little bit easier because it has everything on there.
Perfect, thank you. I appreciate that. So I'm going to move us to our ending, and that is we've asked Erica Baines to kindly close us out with a benediction. Erica.
Rahimeh, I
Thank you
think you
all.
need to take off the spotlight if possible.
What do I do?
There we go. I'll make you the host again.
Yeah. Go back to gallery. Yeah.
Go ahead, Erica. We should be able to hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. September 21st is the UN's International Peace Day of Peace, also known as the Peace Day. The Peace Day provides a globally common date for all humanity to commit to peace. The World Religion for Peace Council, a body of the UN, came up with an idea a few years after the 9/11 event. The people of all religious groups can pray for peace on this day. Shaping peace together is the theme of this year's UN's Day of Peace, and it's on September 21st of this month. The Holy Scripture of the Sikhs, the Guru Granth Sahib Ji, addresses the issue of peace and amity from a collective experience and has collected the messages from saints from different faith groups, including the Sufis, the Muslims, Hindus, of various different castes, Buddhists, Jains, and other religions of that area. The first Guru, Guru Nanak, had traveled 28,000 kilometers over 24 years to understand peace and what disturbs peace. And based on the knowledge he gained during that time, he came up with this interfaith message that makes peace a requirement, and for humans, amity and creating an egalitarian society as a requirement for making sure that not only do we get peace, but we ensure peace for others. As is this year's UN's theme, or the Sikh teaching, shaping peace together is an issue of amity. Whether we want to just consider a friendly relationship between neighbors, between people of a country, or whether we want to forge an international friendly relationship and goodwill. Before I go into the teachings in the Sikh faith on the issue of amity or creating an egalitarian society, from a scholarly perspective, I would like to offer an explanation of the word peace. We can categorize achieving peace in two types. The first type can be said to be of a positive type. In the Sikh scripture, this type indicates an harmonious state of mind, and which is a prerequisite for amity and an egalitarian society. The Sikh teachings on peace makes this a requirement for a Sikh or a learned, knowledgeable person to first commit to this type of peace from within in order to be able to portray and be able to deliver this to others. The second can be grouped as what we call the negative type, and which is only achieved in the absence of warfare and organized violence. That is what the UN Peace Day shoots for. The Sikh scripture guides us on both. The first, or the positive type, is important to achieve, and the second, the negative type, we all need to pray to the Almighty and ask for His mercy to end such type of disturbance of peace. According to the Sikh faith, an egalitarian society, one that is free from social stratification and provides equal opportunity and equal access to resource as well as prestige. Except the Sikh faith does say there are some inherent nature, such as age and such as other disabilities, but absent of that, everyone needs to have the basic rights. It is not just a requirement, the Guru says, for a harmonious existence from within and around, but a requirement for amity or a friendly relationship or goodwill. The Psalm of Peace prayer, also called the Sukhmani Sahib, is on the Holy Scripture between the pages of 262 and 296. In its entirety, it is meant to achieve the positive type or the inner harmonious state of mind, which is a prerequisite for each one of us as God's children to allow for amity and to create an egalitarian society. The Sukhmani Sahib is a daily prayer for most older Sikhs, simply because of the availability of time, but also due to the fact that they raise all the grandchildren, and traditionally teaching children about faith is in their hands. Therefore, a peaceful grandparent, obviously harmonious person, is one that will teach children and affect the children a lot better. Sukhmani, the Psalm of Peace prayer, refers to the highest state of spiritual bliss. The fifth Guru actually composed this, and he has taken the work of various different scholars and saints to create this composition. It actually invokes a reaction against the then existing socio-political situation, which was prevalent in the times of all our gurus between the 15th and the 17th century. It was a period of tyranny and oppression, suppression and hypocrisy. As a daily reader of Sukhmani Sahib myself, mostly one verse a day, it is a great consoler of the mind. Due to time restrictions, I will just go over a few sentences of a few verses. There are 24 verses, each with 1,000 words, therefore 24,000 words in this Psalm of Peace. Obviously, only the elders in our community are able to do this daily. In verse 1, the Psalm of Peace begins with these words: meditate. And through meditations, you will remove not only the ailments of the mind, but also fight various other ailments of the body. In short, through meditation, one can achieve mental as well as physical well-being. In 1,000 words that follows in this verse, the process of meditation and meditating on God's name and its effect on the mind and the body is explained. Verse 2 and 3 describes the creative energy that meditation can bring. And in verse 3, differentiates this type of energy that you get from meditation, from within, from the other methods of worshiping and prayer and praying. Verses 4 through 17 goes through various different human nature and describes the human nature as being weak. Various weaknesses are discussed, such as easily angered, hurt, seeking revenge, feeling loneliness, feeling of loneliness. These are presented as the truth of the state of a mankind. These verses prescribe that accepting a higher source, the divine, and in any situation counting on this divine source as your handholder, as your guide, as your companion, to lead you through decision making. The 17th verse in the Psalm starts with, there is only one God, the creator of all living beings. The Guru outlines the basic structures of all the comprehensive views of reality. Knowledge is prescribed as the source of finding and realizing the truth. Sikh means knowledge, the learned one. Guru Arjan uses this work of the first Guru to point out that peace lessons are about equality in order for us to talk about peace, in order for us to gain peace, in order to affect peace. We need to understand equality. And he offers that if we are all one God's children, then we are all one big family. And how easy is it to pray for a family member? Why, if you considered any other human as anything other than your own sibling, then you may feel that you're hurt by them. But if you are children of the same God, you feel the other person is your own sister, your own brother doing you harm. You then not only pray for yourself for mercy, but also for your sibling. In the Holy Scripture also, the Guruji has offered many, many prayers for those who are affected by the second kind of peace, those that are deprived of peace due to inequality and other injustices. In every Sikh temple, as I will be doing on the day of 21st of September this year, these words would be uttered in the final prayer. Sabbe ji samal, apni meher kar. Dear Lord, have mercy and save your children from all the suffering.
Amen. Thank you, Dr. Erica. I'll just mention that we are doing a International Day of Peace event. It's going to be an online one, and you can participate in a Zoom room like this, or it'll also be on our Facebook Live on our Interfaith Council Facebook page. And this Sunday evening, September 13th at 7 p.m., there's a concert at Christ the King Parish, an outdoor interfaith musical service with Father Paulson, myself, and a trio of Jewish and Muslim musical artists doing some peace music as well. You can go out and sit on the green to listen to it, or you can also see it live on our Facebook page, live streaming from our Interfaith Council live streaming from our Facebook page. Just go to Facebook and look up Interfaith Council of Contra Costa County. Thanks so much for all of our presenters today. Wow, what a great meeting today. And Carolyn.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I look forward to seeing you next month or hearing from you before then, because we put out lots of feelers and lots of ideas. And please take care. Stay out of the ash. Bye.
Be well.
Mm-hmm.
Take care, everyone. Be safe.
Nice to see you, Grace. Grace Michael Okello was on from Uganda there at the end.
That's right.
Yay.
And it's great to have the chaplains from Kaiser here today as well.
Yes.
Thanks so much for joining
Yes, I
us.
see them. Thank you.
Thank
Hi,
you. Thank
Okello.
you.
Hi, everybody.
Yes, Carol.
Nice to see you.
How are you, Okello?
Welcome. I'm doing well.